Get your broke self out of this lobby before we charge you for trespassing." The officer's command ripped through the opulent, hushed atmosphere of the Harbor Light Hotel. The phrase, raw and laced with class prejudice, shattered the polished tranquility of the historic Charleston establishment. A few guests froze mid-check-in, their eyes flicking from the imposing figure of the uniformed officer to the woman standing, not flinching, behind the sprawling, handcrafted mahogany desk. That woman was Dr. Sera Jones. She wore a tailored navy suit, its crisp lines a deliberate contrast to the chaos unfolding. Every inch of her posture was a study in controlled defiance. To the three officers now fanning out across the imported marble floor, and certainly to the sweating man beside them who had just made the 911 call, she was just another defiant black woman being told her place. But Sera's quiet power radiated not from a badge or a title, but from ownership. Ownership of the very ground beneath their feet. Ownership of the legacy her father had built. Just 2 minutes prior, the scene had been different. Sera, her voice a calm contralto, had been delivering a final, damning assessment to Marcus Thorne, the general manager. "Mr. Thorne," she'd said, placing a termination notice on the gleaming desktop, "your performance and ethical breaches are unacceptable. Effective immediately, your employment with the Harbor Light is terminated." Thorne, slick and visibly panicked, had lunged for his phone. He didn't argue. He knew that the termination killed his golden ticket. He had to act fast, to play the card they'd planned for an emergency. "Yes, police," he'd hissed into the receiver, stepping away as if distancing himself from a threat. "I'm the general manager of the Harbor Light. We have a hostile former employee disturbing our high-value guests and refusing to leave the premises." She's becoming aggressive. "We need immediate removal." The sirens were an almost immediate, chilling response, their whine reflecting off the waterfront glass. They pulled up fast, reflecting the unspoken urgency of a powerful political hand being moved. Seraphina watched the officers approach. She didn't raise her voice, but spoke clearly enough for the nearest guests, a wealthy couple from Boston and a group of conventioneers, to hear. "Officers, I am Dr. Seraphina Jones. I am the sole owner and proprietor of this hotel. This man is a disgruntled, now terminated employee making a false report." She reached slowly toward the inner pocket of her navy blazer, a motion intended to retrieve her ID and the deed to the property. Sergeant Klein, a heavy-set man whose face carried a perpetual bored scowl, moved swiftly. "Keep your hands out of your pockets," he barked, his voice booming in the quiet space. Before Sera could explain, his hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with a bruising, practiced force. "Stop resisting," he commanded, though Sera hadn't moved a muscle past the initial attempt to reach her identification. The two younger officers immediately closed in. As the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, Seraphina felt a sickening certainty settle over her. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a coordinated attack. Her refusal to sell the prime waterfront property to Hollis and his developers had made her a target. They weren't just removing a trespasser. They were publicly humiliating the face of black generational wealth in a city determined to erase its past. She straightened her spine, her eyes meeting Thorne's for a brief electric moment. The triumphant smirk on his face was all the confirmation she needed. They could put her in cuffs, but they couldn't take her history. They could take her from the lobby, but they couldn't take her power. "Not yet. You have the right to remain silent," Sergeant Klein recited mechanically, pulling her roughly away from the front desk. The guests' whispers and the sudden bright flashes of cell phone cameras began to fill the elegant lobby, capturing the beginning of a conflict much larger than a simple trespass charge. The morning sun, filtered through the arched, historic windows of the Harbor Light, cast warm, golden stripes across the polished wood and marble. The usual atmosphere of sophisticated calm prevailed, underscored by the faint, comforting scent of fresh cut. Magnolias and sea air, Dr. Seraphina Jones moved through her lobby with the measured grace of a proprietor who not only owned the space but was profoundly connected to its history. Her eyes caught the framed black and white photograph hanging near the concierge desk, a picture of her father, young and proud, standing in front of the building in 1968. He'd bought the modest inn when the neighborhood was overlooked, pouring his life into it. Sera had poured her education and vision into transforming it into this 4-star luxury boutique hotel. "Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy," Sera smiled warmly, pausing to speak with a returning guest, an influential figure in Charleston's preservation community. "I trust your stay has been pleasant." "Absolutely divine, Sera," Mrs. Abernathy replied. "Your sense of Southern charm and elegance is unmatched." "This hotel is a genuine treasure." Sera nodded her thanks and walked toward the front desk. Mama G, the seasoned head of housekeeping, was already there, humming a gentle spiritual while meticulously polishing the brass railings. Her hands, weathered but nimble, moved with a commitment to perfection. Sera made her way to her office just off the lobby. Opening her laptop, a notification from a luxury travel site caught her eye. She clicked it open, a surge of pride warming her chest as she read the new 5-star review. The Harbor Light isn't just a hotel. It's a chapter in Charleston's history, beautifully preserved and exquisitely presented. From the impeccable service to the gorgeous decor, every detail speaks of quality and care. A genuine beacon of hospitality. This was her father's dream realized. A sharp, impatient knock interrupted her satisfaction. Marcus Thorne, still operating under the pretense of his general manager title, stood in the doorway, his sleek suit looking a shade too tight for the early hour. "Miss Rivers, Dr. Jones," he corrected himself quickly, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I wanted to discuss an urgent matter, appearance standards." He closed the door, adopting a posture of confidential importance. "I'm concerned about maintaining our professional image. Some of our housekeeping and wait staff are wearing rather ethnic hairstyles. Specifically, the box braids, twists, and dreadlocks are frankly distracting. They don't align with the aesthetic expectations of our clientele." Sera's composure remained absolute, but her stomach tightened. This wasn't about professionalism. It was about erasure. "Our staff's natural hair is professional, Mr. Thorne," she stated calmly, her voice firm. "We've been through this before. Our staff are well-compensated professionals who deliver exceptional service. We are an upscale hotel rooted in this city's history, and we celebrate the identity of the people who make our service exceptional." Thorne's nostrils flared slightly, a faint crimson rising on his neck. "Our clientele has certain expectations, Dr. Jones," he pressed, leaning slightly on her desk. "Expectations of traditional luxury." "Yes, they expect excellent service, which they receive," Sera smoothly countered, meeting his gaze. "We hire based on skill, Mr. Thorne, not on adherence to an outdated Eurocentric beauty standard. If there are any performance issues, address them, but our policy respects our heritage and our staff's choice in personal presentation." "Was there anything else?" Thorne straightened, defeated but not giving up. He merely said, "The weekend revenue forecasts," before retreating, his agitation evident in the rapid tap-tap-tap of his shoes as he marched back to the front office. Sera watched him go, knowing that the man's hostility was merely a symptom of a much deeper, more menacing plot against the legacy she was sworn to protect. Eli Vance appeared in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Despite his impeccable suit, the discipline of a former Marine was evident in his rigid, straight posture and alert eyes. "Morning." "Mama," Eli said, nodding curtly at Thorne, who was quickly gathering papers from the desk in a pretense of productivity. "Mr. Thorne," Thorne offered a stiff, artificial smile. "Mr. Vance." He knew Eli, as head of operations and security, kept meticulous records and watched everything. "How were the vendor meetings, Eli?" Sera asked, welcoming the shift in atmosphere. "Productive," Eli reported, placing a folder on her desk, unconsciously positioning himself slightly between his mother and Thorne. "The new linen suppliers' prices are better, and their quality is just as good. I'll brief you later, though. There are some inconsistencies in the kitchen's produce delivery manifests I want to track down." Thorne cleared his throat, sensing the implied threat of Eli's precision. "Well, I should return to the front. We're expecting the Charleston Social League luncheon party soon." He retreated quickly, his polished shoes clicking rapidly across the marble. Eli watched him go, his expression darkening. "I don't trust that man, Mama, not one bit." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I ran a basic credit pull and public record search on Thorne when you mentioned his attitude last week. His personal credit score is garbage, he's got multiple liens, but he just closed on a prime downtown condo last month. Cash deal. The numbers don't add up. He's either laundering money or he's an inside operative." "Neither do I, baby," Sera sighed, tapping the termination notice that was still on her desk. "But he knows his job, and he brought in a certain kind of business, which kept the bank happy. He brings in the kind of people who want to see us gone." Eli muttered. Sera stood and walked to her office window, which overlooked the bustling lobby. A family was checking in, the children wide-eyed at the historic chandeliers. This is what matters, Eli. When your father and I bought this building, hotels like this didn't welcome us. Now any child can walk in and see someone who looks like them owning it. Movement near the side elevators caught her eye. Thorne was speaking in low, urgent tones with a man in an expensive gray linen suit. There was an intimacy to their body language. They stood too close. Thorne's hand partially concealed a quick, tight handshake, and both men cast quick, anxious glances around the room before they parted. The man in the gray suit walked briskly toward the entrance. As he passed through a shaft of morning sunlight, Sera's breath hitched. She recognized the silver hair, the confident stride, and the shark-like smile. It was Councilman Reginald "Reggie" Hollis, the chairman of the Urban Redevelopment Committee. Hollis was the same man who had been in the news last month, praising the revitalization of the historic King Street area, the same area where 3 long-standing black-owned businesses had mysteriously lost their leases before being bought out by a single, unnamed developer. Eli stepped up beside her, following her gaze. Hollis, what's he doing here, and why is he whispering with Thorne? Sera watched Hollis disappear through the revolving door, her reflection in the window showing a sudden, cold resolve. I think, Eli, she said softly, we just found out who signed Thorne's condo check. The Harbor Light lobby buzzed with the lively energy of the Southern Educators Association convention. Waves of retired and current teachers, predominantly black, filled the elegant space. Their animated chatter about curriculum and community mixing with the soft classical music playing through the hidden speakers. Near the grand entrance, Gloria Mama G. Jenkins stood, her maternal instincts fully engaged. She was tending to Mr. Booker, the hotel's longtime linen delivery driver, a man whose dark blue uniform was soaked with sweat from hours spent working in the oppressive Charleston heat. Mr. Booker was slumped briefly on one of the lobby's plush velvet benches, his head bowed. Mama G gently held a tall glass of ice water to his trembling hands. Take your time, Mr. Booker, Mama G murmured, her voice laced with deep, genuine concern. This August heat's no joke. You delivered our linens right on time, as always. Least we can do is offer you water and a minute to catch your breath. The driver nodded gratefully, sipping the cool water. Thank you, Mama G. Been on the road since dawn. The peaceful communal moment was instantly shattered by Marcus Thorne's sharp, accusatory voice. What in the hell is this? Thorne stormed across the marble floor, his face flushed with manufactured anger. He clearly saw the scene not as an act of kindness, but as a severe lapse in the hotel's perceived standards. We are not running a homeless shelter. This is a 4-star establishment. Mama G straightened her spine, her expression hardening with offense. Mr. Thorne, this is Mr. Booker. He's our linen driver, and he's resting for a minute. I don't care who he claims to be. Thorne's voice rose, drawing the immediate, curious attention of nearby convention guests. He's sitting here looking like he just came off the street. This is the Harbor Light, not some roadside rest stop. Get him out! Mr. Booker struggled to his feet, exhaustion warring with his dignity. I'm going, sir. Didn't mean no trouble. Thorne. The name, spoken by Dr. Seraphina Jones, cut through the lobby's noise like a clean surgical blade. The entire space fell quiet, the teachers pausing their conversations, their gazes locking onto Sera as she emerged from her office. She crossed the floor with a measured, deliberate pace, her navy heels striking a rhythmic, powerful beat on the marble. Thorne turned to face her, his mouth still twisted with rage. Dr. Jones, this is a security issue. We can't have random people lounging in our lobby, looking disorderly. It reflects poorly on management. Mr. Booker has been delivering our linens reliably for 3 years, Sera said evenly, standing protectively between Thorne and the weary driver. He is a valued partner of this business, and Mama G was absolutely correct to offer him water and rest on a day like this. He is welcome here. She turned to the driver. Sir, please take your time. Thorne's face darkened, his control slipping. You don't make those decisions. I am the general manager, and I say he needs to leave. He leaned in close to Sera, dropping his voice to a dangerous hiss. And you need to stop undermining my authority in front of the staff and guests. Several convention guests had discreetly pulled out their phones, their cameras already trained on the heated confrontation. Sera noticed, but kept her focus solely on Thorne. "You will apologize to both Mr. Booker and Mama G," Sera commanded, her voice low, steady, and utterly non-negotiable. "Now," Thorne let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I don't take orders from you. In fact, you know what?" He pulled out his personal cell phone, his fingers jabbing furiously at the screen. "Yes, police. We have a situation at the Harbor Light Hotel. An aggressive woman is threatening our staff and refusing to leave the premises. We need officers immediately." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Mama G's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. The die had been cast. Thorne's controlled fury finally broke. Having been publicly challenged and defeated on his turf, he retaliated with the ultimate weapon. He pulled out his personal phone, his fingers jabbing furiously at the screen to dial 911. "Yes, police," he announced loudly into the receiver, making sure the entire lobby could hear the performance. "I am the general manager of the Harbor Light Hotel. We have a hostile, aggressive woman here who has been terminated and is now threatening our staff and disturbing our high-value guests." His eyes, cold and locked onto Sera's, were devoid of any professional courtesy. Gasps rippled through the convention attendees. The educators, already indignant over Thorne's treatment of Mr. Booker and Mama G, now acted decisively. Dozens of phones were raised immediately, lights flashing as they recorded the unfolding scene from multiple angles. They understood the gravity of a black woman being falsely accused of hostility in a luxury space she owned. "She's become completely unmanageable and is refusing to leave the property," Thorne continued into the phone, his voice dropping slightly to imply serious danger. "We need officers immediately to remove this trespasser before she causes any more damage." He hung up with a dramatic flourish and smiled, a cold, calculating curve of his lips. "Now we'll see who truly runs this place," Thorne sneered, savoring the moment of his perceived victory. Sera stood perfectly still, her heart pounding, but her face composed. She knew the protocol of this scenario. Panic meant failure. She addressed Mama G, her voice clear and measured amidst the rising murmurs. "Mama G, please help Mr. Booker to the staff rest area." "Thank you both." Then she turned back to Thorne, her eyes steady and penetrating. "Mr. Thorne, you're making a serious mistake. A career-ending mistake." Thorne scoffed, straightening his tie. "The only mistake, Dr. Jones, was letting you think you belonged behind this desk. That this legacy project of yours could stand against real development." His words confirmed her darkest suspicions. This was about Hollis, about the land, and about power. In the distance, the sharp, wailing keen of sirens cut through the Charleston air, growing closer with alarming speed. Through the arched, gold-tinted windows, the chaotic pulse of red and blue lights began to flash, painting the elegant lobby in garish, unsettling colors. The convention guests murmured, the clicking and whirring of their cameras intensifying as the sound of heavy footsteps approached the revolving doors. 3 officers, 2 men and 1 woman, burst through the revolving door. Their entry was swift, aggressive, and devoid of the caution usually afforded a high-end establishment. Sergeant Klein, a large man with a reputation in the community for heavy-handedness, immediately locked onto Sera. The second male officer, Officer Rohr, moved to flank him while the female officer hung back, her hand resting uncertainly on her belt. "What is the situation here?" Klein demanded, though his eyes, already settled on Sera, conveyed a clear prejudice and preconceived narrative. Thorne pointed dramatically. "This woman is disturbing guests, refusing to leave and threatening staff. We need her removed." "I am Dr. Seraphina Jones, the owner of this hotel," Sera stated clearly, keeping her voice even despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She reached slowly for the inner pocket of her blazer. "I have my ID and the property deed right here." Klein's response was brutal and immediate. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with bruising force. "Stop right there. You were told to keep your hands still." "I'm just getting my identification," Sera insisted, her words cutting off in a sharp gasp as Klein violently twisted her arm behind her back. "Stop resisting," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the high ceiling, even though Sera hadn't moved against the pressure. The marble counter rushed up to meet her face as Klein slammed her forward. The sickening crack of her glasses breaking against the stone mixed with the horrified screams of the convention guests. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, phones recording every agonizing second as Officer Rohr moved in. pressing her knee into Sera's back while Klein kept her pinned. "She's not resisting. Please, she owns this hotel." Mama G's voice rose, choked with sobs, piercing the chaos. "This is Dr. Jones. She built this place." "Sure she did," Klein drawled, watching with detached satisfaction. "And I'm the King of England." Blood trickled from where Sera's cheek had split against the counter, staining the pristine navy of her blazer. She remained still, her breathing measured despite the weight crushing her lungs. Decades of observing civil rights struggles had taught her that panic was the greatest danger in moments of police confrontation. "Mama," Eli's voice boomed through the lobby as he charged from the back office. "Get off her!" "That's my mother." "Stay back!" Klein barked, drawing his taser. The two younger officers immediately rushed to intercept Eli, whose military training warred visibly with his instinct to protect his mother. "She owns this building," Eli shouted, struggling against the officers. "Check her ID." "Just check the damn deed." The crowd of educators had grown, their phones documenting everything. "This is wrong," someone shouted. "She's telling the truth." Thorne stood behind the front desk, adjusting his tie with a sickeningly satisfied smirk. His eyes met Sera's as Klein hauled her roughly to her feet. Her broken glasses dangled uselessly from one ear, and blood dripped onto the pristine marble floor she'd walked so proudly just minutes before. Mama G wept openly, supported by Mr. Booker. "Please, her name's on everything." "Look at the pictures on the wall." But the officers weren't looking. They marched Sera toward the door. The crowd parted, many still filming, their protests echoing. Through the gold-tinted windows, the flashing lights outside had drawn a crowd of curious onlookers who also stopped to stare and record. Sera kept her head high as they led her out into the brutal Charleston sun. The Harbor Lights facade gleamed behind her, the historic building a silent witness to her public humiliation. The officer opened the back door of the cruiser. As Sera was shoved inside, she caught a last glimpse of Eli, still struggling, his face contorted with helpless rage. Thorne stood in the doorway, a look of pure triumph on his face before the door slammed shut. The fluorescent lights of the police precinct booking room hummed with a grating, relentless sound, casting harsh, greenish shadows across Sera's face. Her wrists throbbed where the steel cuffs had cut into her skin, and the metallic tang of blood from her split cheek lingered in her mouth. Despite the pain and the indignity, she kept her posture meticulously straight, her expression a mask of impassive dignity. Two male officers, leaning against a worn desk nearby, made no effort to lower their voices. "Can you believe these people?" One officer snickered, loud enough for Sera to hear easily. "Always claiming to own something they couldn't afford for a week." "Yeah," the other one replied, pushing off the desk and adjusting his belt. "Next thing you know, she'll say she owns half of Charleston." "They come in here with a chip on their shoulder the size of the whole peninsula." They both laughed, the sound hollow and derisive in the concrete room. Sera's gaze remained fixed on the scarred beige wall ahead. Her mind, however, was sharp and active, completely detached from the humiliation of her surroundings. She wasn't internalizing their cruelty. She was cataloging it. Every word, every sneer, the specific names on the officers' uniforms. The time on the booking clock, all of it was being filed away. The booking officer, a younger man, cleared his throat impatiently, tapping his pen against the laminated form. "Name again, ma'am?" "We can do this the easy way." Sera's voice, when it finally came, was steady, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. She was not a suspect. She was a witness to a crime against her own rights. "Dr. Seraphina Jones," she stated. Then she added, without missing a beat, "Look up your city tax records. The Harbor Light Hotel. Proprietor, you'll find my information there." The officer frowned, annoyance flickering across his face. "Listen, lady, we don't have time for games. Just tell me your date of birth and address." The door to the booking room burst open before he could finish. A sudden sharp click of high heels on linoleum announced the arrival of a force greater than their combined bureaucratic authority. The door to the booking room burst open, and Adiur's Ava Sharma strode in. Her heels clicked sharply against the linoleum floor like a metronome setting a furious pace, and her tailored power suit and fiercely determined expression commanded immediate, uncomfortable attention. A thick manila folder was clutched like a weapon in her hand. "Remove those handcuffs from my client immediately," Ava ordered, her voice cutting through the stale air of the room like a razor. The booking officer, flustered by the sudden, Professional intrusion stammered. Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to... Ava didn't wait. She slammed the manila folder onto the desk. Papers spilled out, spreading across the surface in an undeniable torrent of proof. These, she announced, her voice rising to a dangerous pitch, are the property deeds, business licenses, and city tax records for the Harbor Light Hotel. My client, Dr. Seraphina Jones, is the sole owner and proprietor. She spread the documents one by one, her movements precise and deliberate, creating an inescapable tableau of authority. Here is the certificate of occupancy. Here is last month's property tax payment, which, I might remind you, funds your department. And here, she stabbed a finger at a specific piece of letterhead, is the letter of commendation from your chief of police, thanking Dr. Jones for hosting last year's police charity gala, free of charge. The booking officer's face drained of color as he scanned the papers. The lounging officers, who had been joking just moments before, fell silent, their smirks evaporating instantly. Sergeant Klein appeared in the doorway, his earlier bravado completely dissolving as he took in the scene. Officer Rohr stood frozen behind him, her hand unconsciously touching the position where her body camera was located. I want these cuffs off my client now, Ava demanded, leaning over the desk. Unless you'd like to explain to the press outside why you are continuing to detain a prominent, tax-paying business owner after assaulting her in her own establishment. We are preparing to file federal civil rights violations, assault charges, and a lawsuit for public humiliation. The booking officer fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking slightly as he unlocked and removed Sera's handcuffs. Sera slowly rubbed her wrists, the angry red marks stark against her skin. The captain would like to speak with you, Klein began weakly. Ava cut him off with a dismissive wave. Dr. Jones will not be speaking to anyone. We're leaving. You will be hearing from my office regarding the full extent of yesterday's violations. With the handcuffs finally removed, Dr. Seraphina Jones slowly rubbed her raw wrists, the angry red marks a stark physical reminder of the assault. She gathered her dignity like a shield, straightening her blood-stained blazer. Despite the bruise blossoming on her cheek and her disheveled state, she carried herself with an unmistakable, quiet authority. We are leaving now, Ava Sharma stated to the room, placing a protective hand lightly on Sera's back. The booking officer remained behind his desk, shamefaced, while the other officers in the hallway froze, turning their heads to watch the unprecedented spectacle. The whispering followed Sera and Ava like shadows, the quiet sound of power shifting. The walk from the booking room to the front exit felt endless. Officers, staff, and detectives paused to stare at Sera, not with contempt now, but with stark, uncomfortable realization. They were looking at the victim of an egregious civil rights violation, not a hostile trespasser. They were looking at the face that was about to launch a federal investigation into their precinct. As they approached the glass exit doors, the scene outside became clear. Camera lights blazed and a tightly packed crowd of reporters, news vans, and citizens pressed forward, kept back only by a thin line of uniformed officers. The sound of their collective shout was a roar. Dr. Jones! Do you have a statement? What happened in there? Ava shielded Sera, guiding her toward the station steps. Sera paused at the top of the short flight of stairs. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, painting the Charleston sky in dramatic shades of orange and purple behind her. For a moment, the cameras stopped their frantic snapping, anticipating her reaction. She looked directly into the center of the blinding lights, her bruised face unwavering, her eyes conveying a calm that belied the chaos. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was clear, measured, and carried across the sudden hush with powerful resonance. Sometimes silence is the loudest protest. She said nothing else. She offered no accusations, no details, and no anger. By refusing to speak, she denied them the soundbites and the emotional reaction they craved. She allowed the image, her dignified, injured self against the backdrop of the corrupt police station, to speak volumes. The cameras erupted in a furious volley of flashes, capturing the moment of her unwavering composure. This image of the successful black entrepreneur assaulted and arrested in her own establishment was instantly captured and transmitted across the country. Ava quickly guided Sera through the throng to the waiting car. Once inside the quiet, leather-seated interior, Sera finally allowed her shoulders to drop slightly. The harsh glare of the city was replaced by the cool, comforting anonymity of the vehicle. Ava, driving swiftly away from the precinct, reached into her briefcase and retrieved Sera's recovered purse. Sera's phone was buzzing frantically. She pulled it out. Hundreds of notifications flooded the screen. At the very top, a message flashed from J.T. Evans, the major investigative podcaster and journalist, J.T. Evans, 1745. Dr. Jones, I just watched the lobby footage. Multiple angles. It's absolutely damning. Thorne's call, Klein's aggression, the slam. It's a textbook violation. I have the files. Preparing to drop the story as an emergency episode tonight. This goes national. A surge of cold, powerful energy coursed through Sera, replacing the residual exhaustion. They had planned a quick, quiet humiliation to force a fire sale. Instead, they had given her the loudest stage imaginable. As Ava navigated the busy streets, away from the police station and its harsh, toxic lights, Sera gazed out the window at her city. The bruise on her cheek throbbed, a steady, constant reminder. But her mind was clear. They had chosen the wrong woman to target. They had chosen the wrong legacy to try and erase. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering her strength. The time for silence was over. The time for meticulously calculated war had begun. The first rays of sunrise barely pierced the heavy, humidity-laden air of Charleston when Dr. Seraphina Jones finally reached for her phone. It hadn't stopped buzzing since 3 a.m., transforming her bedroom into a constant, vibrating nexus of national outrage. She winced as her bruised muscles protested the movement. The growing purple discoloration on her cheekbone was starkly visible in the screen's reflection. The numbers were staggering: 57 missed calls, over 300 text messages, and tens of thousands of social media notifications. The footage of her arrest had not just gone viral, it had exploded into a national crisis. J.T. Evans had released his emergency podcast episode at midnight, threading together the dozens of eyewitness phone videos into a damning, synchronized narrative. Different angles showed the full, unedited horror. Thorne's smug, false report, Sergeant Klein's immediate, unprovoked aggression, and the sickening moment Sera's face was slammed into the marble counter. The footage was crystal clear, undeniable, and broadcast the inherent injustice directly into millions of homes. "Mama, you need to see this." Eli's voice, tight with controlled fury, came through her closed door. Sera quickly wrapped herself in a silk robe and opened it. Eli stood there, holding his tablet, his jaw locked tight. On the screen, CNN was running the footage on repeat. The headline burned across the bottom: Black hotel owner arrested for trespassing in her own business. Federal inquiry looms. "It's everywhere," Eli said quietly. "Every major network, every cable show. They're calling it the Charleston counter slam." Sera sank into her armchair, scrolling through her phone. The repercussions were instantaneous and powerful. The Southern Educators Association, whose members had been witnesses, had released a blistering statement demanding accountability. The Black Business Coalition and various veterans' rights organizations were already coordinating a mass protest outside the Charleston Police Department headquarters. They weren't just angry about an assault. They were outraged at the blatant attempt to use police power to destabilize and steal Black-owned generational wealth. Moving carefully, Sera walked to her closet. She chose her armor deliberately: a crisp white blazer, a stark contrast to yesterday's blood-stained navy, elegant gold jewelry, and perfectly pressed slacks. The split lip made applying lipstick difficult, but she managed, focusing on the calm, powerful woman looking back from the mirror, a woman whose injuries were now a badge of undeniable truth. At exactly 7 a.m., Sera sat at her home office desk, facing her laptop camera for the emergency board meeting. The faces of the board members, powerful investors and community leaders, filled the screen, their expressions ranging from sincere concern to barely contained fury at the reputational damage to the city. The chairman spoke first, his voice gravelly with severity. "Dr. Jones, on behalf of the entire board, we are appalled by yesterday's events. We've reviewed all internal security footage and witness statements." He paused for dramatic effect. Marcus Thorne's actions were unconscionable. He is terminated effective immediately, with his access revoked and a lawsuit pending for egregious malfeasance. Another board member quickly added, "We're announcing it to the press within the hour. The market cannot tolerate this kind of corruption." Simultaneously, Sera's phone pinged with an official alert. The Charleston Police Department had issued a terse, Damage control statement. All 3 officers involved were suspended pending investigation, and Internal Affairs was launching a full review of arrest protocols. The suspensions, while necessary, were merely a skirmish one, not the war. As the board call concluded, social media exploded yet again. An investigative reporter had cross-referenced public photos and attendance lists, uncovering photographic evidence of Councilman Reggie Hollis huddled with Marcus Thorne at a private fundraiser just 3 days before the arrest. Hollis's office frantically released a denial of any knowledge or involvement with Thorne's actions at the hotel, but the damage was done. The phrase "Justice for Harbor Light" was trending nationwide, now inextricably linked to political corruption and gentrification. Stepping downstairs, Sera found Eli transforming the formal dining room into a command center. Guests, checking in specifically to show support, were creating a defiant atmosphere in the lobby. The senior teachers' convention voted unanimously to extend their stay, Eli reported, his eyes glowing with pride. They said they won't let intimidation win. And 3 national civil rights organizations have booked our entire East Wing for next month. Mama G appeared with a cup of soothing herbal tea, her eyes still red but her posture firm. "Those officers had no right, Miss Sera," she whispered, setting the cup down. Sera squeezed Mama G's hand, feeling the strength of the community behind her. "We're still here, Mama G," she replied, still standing. "Stronger than before." Her phone rang. "Unknown number," she answered, putting it on speaker out of habit. A distorted electronic voice crackled through the line, low and menacing. "You should have just sold the hotel when you had the chance." Eli immediately began tracing the call, but the line clicked dead too quickly. The day, already brutal, had just escalated from a legal battle to a personal, terrifying threat. The morning after the chilling, anonymous threat, the dining room of the Harbor Light had been completely transformed. All the elegant table settings were gone, replaced by folding tables laden with laptops, charging cables, documents, and hot coffee urns. This was the command center, humming with quiet, focused activity, a deliberate contrast to the violent chaos of the past 48 hours. Dr. Seraphina Jones, still wearing her crisp white blazer, presided over the operation. The visible bruise on her cheek was a somber, constant reminder of the stakes. She was flanked by Eli, who moved with the efficiency of a seasoned marine logistics officer, and Mama G, who served as the indispensable anchor, coordinating staff morale and fielding calls from local community leaders, offering resources. Eli, head of operations and now security chief in all but title, was coordinating efforts with impressive military precision. He had compartmentalized the crisis. One team managed guest support and media inquiries, ensuring the hotel's operation remained flawless and defiant. Another focused on reviewing all recent security and staff data, looking for any other breaches orchestrated by Thorne. The good news: "Mama," Eli reported, pointing to a whiteboard filled with tracking details, "is the revenue is up. The support check-ins are compensating for any cancellations. People are booking here because of what happened. They want to vote with their wallets." Sera nodded, but her attention was focused on the deeper problem: the corruption. "Thorne didn't act alone, Eli, and that threat last night confirms it." Hollis is moving beyond political pressure. He's now resorting to intimidation. We need to find the definitive link, not just the circumstantial evidence of their meeting. Just then, Sera's dedicated line rang. The caller ID flashed J.T. Evans. Sera immediately put the call on speaker, gesturing for Eli to listen closely. "JT, what do you have?" JT's voice, usually cool and measured for his podcast, was tight with excitement. "Dr. Jones, Eli, I think we just found the smoking gun, and it's not small. I've been pulling Thorne's public financial data, tax liens, property records, and the Limited Liability Corporation, LLC filings linked to his name. You know how he suddenly afforded that downtown condo?" "A cash deal," Eli interjected. "We flagged it. Exactly. The money didn't come from a legitimate bank loan. It came from a series of monthly deposits into his personal account, labeled as consulting fees, big deposits. They started the day after he was hired at the Harbor Light, essentially doubling his salary." Sera felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "A kickback," she breathed. "Worse," JT corrected. "I traced those deposits back to their source, a shell corporation called Harborfront Development LLC. Eli moved to the whiteboard. scribbling the name in bold letters. Shell Company. Classic move. It gets better, JT continued, the excitement palpable in his voice. I pulled the incorporation papers for Harborfront Development LLC. Shell companies often use proxies, but this one made a clumsy mistake. The primary listing for registered agent is a small-time lawyer, but the list of principals, the owners and beneficiaries, is right there in black and white. Sera leaned forward, her eyes locked on the speaker. Who is it, JT? The pause on the line felt enormous. The name listed first, Dr. Jones, Councilman Reginald Hollis, and a few of his known political donors. Thorne wasn't just an angry employee. He was a paid operative. Hollis was paying him substantial monthly sums to gather internal intelligence, undermine your authority, damage the hotel's reputation, and presumably prepare for a hostile takeover once you were sufficiently stressed to sell. The revelation landed with crushing weight, yet also with immense satisfaction. They now had the paper trail, the undeniable link between the political power structure and the petty managerial aggression. The incident on the marble floor was not an isolated act of police brutality, it was the planned culmination of a criminal conspiracy orchestrated by a city councilman. He was using the hotel's resources against us. Eli ground out, his hands clenching into fists. He brought in those unprofitable vendors. He tried to fire the staff. He was trying to create operational chaos. The appearance standards, Sera realized. His attempt to enforce those racist hairstyle rules. It wasn't just his prejudice. It was meant to cause staff walkouts, to create a labor crisis he could use as leverage. And the 911 call, Eli added, was the final act. A desperate attempt to use the state's armed power to literally remove the legal owner from her own property, all to benefit Hollis's shell company. Sera took a deep breath, the pain in her cheek momentarily forgotten. This wasn't just a win for a lawsuit. It was a win for the community against systemic power. JT, secure that documentation. Do not release it yet. We need to hit them with this and the lawsuit simultaneously. Understood, JT replied. The next podcast episode is going to be explosive, Dr. Jones. You gave them the optics. Now we give them the facts. As the call ended, Sera looked at Eli. The threat, the arrest, the humiliation. It all made sense now. The enemy was not just a disgruntled manager. It was a powerful councilman willing to abuse his office to erase her legacy. Thorne was the key, Sera said, her voice steely. But Hollis is the lock. We pivot, Eli. We stop defending the hotel and start attacking the source of the rot. We take this evidence to Ava, and we file that federal lawsuit linking the police action directly to Hollis's criminal conspiracy. The white blazer suddenly felt less like protection and more like the uniform of a commanding general. Evening settled over Charleston, painting the harbor sky in deep, gentle purples and blues. Within the harbor light, a relative quiet descended after the frantic activity of the day. Most of the supportive guests had retired to their rooms, and the soft strains of jazz played through the lobby's hidden speakers. Mama G was finishing her rounds, pushing her heavy cleaning cart loaded with fresh linens and towels. She lingered in the lobby, her presence a quiet act of solidarity, tidying the magazines and straightening the velvet cushions. Dr. Seraphina Jones stood near the front windows, looking out onto the street. The golden light spilling from the hotel illuminated the historic cobblestones. She felt a profound connection to this spot. The very land her father had worked so hard to acquire, now shining, defiant, and rooted in the heart of a city trying to forget its past. The stillness was shattered by a sound that ripped through the elegant quiet, a horrific, explosive crash of shattering glass and a high, sharp scream. Mama G stumbled backward, clutching her chest, narrowly avoiding the impact point. A large, dark brick had been hurled through one of the expansive front windows, landing inches from her cleaning cart. Shards of glass scattered across the polished marble floor like deadly, glittering diamonds. Eli Vance vaulted instantly over the front desk, his Marine training overriding any hesitation. He raced toward the street, simultaneously pulling out his phone to contact the hotel's on-site security team and calling the police. Security! Perimeter check now. Get a description of anyone running from the front. Sera moved toward Mama G first, her mind working with clinical speed despite the adrenaline. Are you hurt, Mama G? Stay back from the broken glass. Mama G was trembling, her eyes wide with shock. I'm all right, Miss Sera. It just missed me. Sera glanced at the hole in the window, a gaping, jagged wound on the face of her hotel. Then she saw the brick. Tied to it with cheap twine was a small piece of thick, expensive paper, the kind used for high-end business letterheads. Sera knelt, carefully picking up the brick, feeling its surprising weight. It was cold, dense, and menacing. Beside it, she retrieved the note. The message was typed, not handwritten, ensuring anonymity and suggesting a business-like malice. Next time, it won't be glass. Sell. The threat was clear, cold, and utterly terrifying. It was confirmation that Hollis and his associates, seeing their paper trail exposed, had escalated to physical intimidation and domestic terrorism. They were no longer trying to force a sale through bureaucracy or false arrest. They were using violence. The weight of the brick in her hand was the physical manifestation of the immense pressure trying to crush her legacy. Eli returned, his jaw tight. They're gone too fast. I called the police, a different precinct this time. They're sending a unit. Sera remained focused on the immediate operational response, refusing to show fear. Get the maintenance team here. We need the glass cleaned and the window boarded up tonight, she instructed calmly, still holding the brick and the note. Eli, call our vendor in Charleston immediately. We are replacing this window with the thickest reinforced ballistic-grade glass available. I don't care about the cost. We will not be hit like this again. She refused to let the necessary plywood boarding look like a sign of defeat. It would be temporary. The message she intended to send was one of unyielding resilience. We need to document everything, Sera continued, handing the brick and the note to Eli. These are critical evidence, connecting the threats directly to the financial pressure we've been facing. This goes straight to Ava Sharma tomorrow morning. This isn't just property damage. It's a terrorist threat linked to political coercion. Mama G, regaining her composure, started to push her cart again. I'll clean up this mess, Miss Sera. No, Mama G, you go home, Sera insisted gently. The maintenance crew will handle this. We need you safe and rested. As the maintenance lights came on, illuminating the debris, Sera stood beside the gaping hole in the window. The cold night air poured in. She looked out at the city that was trying to swallow her whole. The threat was a desperate, vicious move, but it hadn't broken her. It had only hardened her resolve. They wanted the Harbor Lights land, but what they were going to get was a woman fighting for her father's dream, armed with a federal lawsuit and a brick. The morning after the brick attack dawned gray and humid, the air in Charleston thick with moisture and tension. Despite the overnight efforts of the maintenance crew, the dark plywood covering the gaping hole in the front window looked exactly like what the attackers intended, a visible sign of vulnerability. Dr. Seraphina Jones arrived early, her face still bruised, supervising the final cleanup. She refused to open the hotel for business until every shard of glass was gone, but the boarded-up window stood as an unavoidable, defiant scar at precisely 8:47 a.m. 3 unmarked City of Charleston vehicles, a mix of plain white vans and sedans, pulled up outside the Harbor Light. 6 individuals in official khaki uniforms and carrying clipboards filed out. They were led by a thin, officious-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses, who moved with the inflated, petty authority of someone who enjoyed wielding small amounts of power. Building inspection, fire marshal's office, and health department, the lead inspector announced brusquely at the front desk, not bothering to look at the receptionist. We're here for an immediate safety assessment. Complaint-driven. Sera emerged from her office, her demeanor utterly composed despite the churning anger in her stomach. I was not notified of any scheduled inspection, she stated, her white blazer pristine, her voice level. The lead inspector barely glanced at her, flipping through his papers with exaggerated importance. Complaint-driven, ma'am. We received multiple anonymous reports of structural concerns, particularly regarding the East Wing Foundation and deficiencies in the fire suppression systems. Multiple reports all logged late yesterday afternoon. How incredibly convenient, Sera said, her voice dripping with irony. She knew this was the next phase of the assault, weaponizing the bureaucracy. Having failed with the police and physical intimidation, Hollis was now deploying city departments to find or manufacture code violations that could force a temporary closure or rack up prohibitive fines. Eli appeared silently at his mother's side. His rigid military posture was evident. He slipped Sera a small, folded note. Klein's car across street. Unmarked, 2 occupants. Sergeant Klein wasn't just suspended. He was now acting as a spotter, confirming the coordination between the police faction and the city government. The inspectors spread out through the hotel like an invading army. They disrupted the breakfast service, flashed cameras at minor cracks in the hallway plaster, loudly questioned the age of the kitchen equipment, and made a show of shaking their heads and muttering ominously into their phones about non-compliance. Sera immediately called Attendant Ava Sharma. She kept her voice low as she spoke into the phone. "They're here, Ava. Building, fire, health. All at once. They're manufacturing violations. I need you here to shut this down before they find something they can use to issue a closure order." The disruption lasted only 20 minutes before Ava Sharma swept through the front door. Her high heels clicked against the marble floor like a ticking time bomb, and her expensive briefcase swung purposefully. She bypassed the reception desk and went straight for the group of inspectors huddled near the lobby restrooms. "I'll need to see your inspection authorization forms," Ava announced, not bothering with pleasantries, "and the documentation for these alleged multiple complaints." The lead inspector straightened, visibly deflating under the lawyer's intense scrutiny. "This is a routine. Nothing about this is routine," Ava cut him off with the precision of a practiced attorney. "Complaint-driven inspections require 24-hour notice under City Ordinance 47.3. You are disrupting the operations of a federally registered business. Furthermore, I am extremely curious about the timing, given yesterday's widely publicized events." Ava pulled out her own phone, snapping rapid-fire photos of the inspectors' badges, their identification numbers, and their vehicles parked outside. "I want full names and department IDs. I'm sure the federal civil rights investigators will be very interested in this coordinated harassment. Tell me, who initiated this inspection request? Which city council member received these multiple reports yesterday?" The lead inspector's face reddened, the thin facade of his authority crumbling. "We're just doing our jobs, ma'am." "No," Ava replied, her voice cold and lethal. "You're doing someone else's dirty work, and we will find out who signed this order. You are now all directly implicated in a federal civil rights conspiracy and the economic harassment of my client." Through the remaining gaps in the boarded window, Eli watched Sergeant Klein's unmarked car suddenly pull away from its surveillance spot. The inspectors huddled nervously, whispered amongst themselves, and then began packing up their equipment with obvious, resentful reluctance. "We'll be filing our report," the lead inspector muttered, avoiding eye contact. "And we'll be filing ours," Ava responded pleasantly, folding her arms. "Have a nice day. Get off my client's property." As the city vehicles drove away, defeated, Sera let out a slow breath. She looked at Eli. They tried the police, they tried the brick, and they tried the bureaucracy. 3 strikes. "They're getting desperate," Eli noted. "Which means they're vulnerable," Sera concluded. "Time for lunch with Aunt Eunice. Some traditions, especially counsel from the elders, cannot be broken." The battle was moving from defense to counterattack. The small historic cafe, located deep within a quiet, established black neighborhood, blocks away from the gentrified waterfront, had been Dr. Seraphina Jones's sanctuary for years. It was her customary meeting spot with her longtime mentor, Aunt Eunice, a formidable, retired high school principal who had educated half of Charleston's black professional class and carried an effortless, natural authority that few politicians could match. Aunt Eunice was already at their usual corner table, her silver hair gleaming beneath the soft light of the window. Her presence drew respectful nods from the few other patrons. She wore a simple but elegant suit, her hands strong and steady as she stirred her cup of herbal tea. "Child," Eunice said softly as Sera sat down, immediately noticing the vivid bruise on Sera's cheek. "You look tired. But you look like a woman who knows exactly where her enemy is." Sera leaned back in the creaking wooden chair, allowing some of her meticulously maintained guard to drop. "I am tired, Aunt Eunice. They are coming at us from every direction. Police, developers, a brick through the window, and now the city inspectors. It's a coordinated siege." Eunice nodded slowly, her gaze sharp and knowing. "Of course they are. You scared them, Sera. Nothing is more dangerous to the established order than a black woman who won't back down from a dream that was earned, not given." She reached across the table, her fingers strong despite their age, briefly covering Sera's hand. "But that's exactly why you cannot get tired. That is what they are counting on." Eunice took a slow sip of her tea, her mind cataloging the city's history. The inspectors are just the beginning. They'll try health inspections, tax audits, zoning changes, the entire playbook. It's the same one they used on your daddy's generation to try and force foreclosures when this district was considered undesirable. Different suits, same evil intent. Sera took a moment to absorb the generational weight of those words. It wasn't just a business negotiation. It was a continuation of a decades-long battle for economic control and dignity. They want the land, Sera stated firmly. They want the Harbor Lights footprint because it's the key piece of the waterfront development. Always have, Eunice confirmed. Your daddy bought that building when they thought downtown was dead and moving inland. Now it's gold, and they simply cannot stand that we own a piece of it, especially one that shines as brightly as yours. They want to erase your legacy because it proves we can build, we can own, and we can prosper without their permission. I won't sell, Sera vowed. The conviction in her voice absolute. Of course you won't. Eunice's smile was fierce. But you can't just play defense, honey. You are going to make them choke on their own corruption. You have the leverage now. The world is watching, and you have the evidence. Their food arrived. Shrimp and grits for Eunice, a light salmon salad for Sera. They ate in comfortable, thoughtful silence until Sera's phone buzzed. It was a text, followed immediately by a call from J.T. Evans. Sera immediately put the call on speaker so Eunice could hear. "JT, what is it?" JT's voice was electric. "Dr. Jones, I'm wrapping up the financial deep dive. I have the bank statements and the LLC filings. The story is definitive. Marcus Thorne received exactly $7,500 every single month from Harborfront Development LLC starting the week he was hired. I've just confirmed through a confidential source at the state registrar's office. The principal for that LLC is indeed Councilman Reginald Hollis." Eunice's eyes narrowed, a cold fury settling on her face. "The Lord may work in mysterious ways," she said softly, her voice carrying the wisdom of ages. "But karma works right out in the open. You have the motive, the method, and the man, Sera. The brick, the police, the inspectors, it all flows from Hollis." Sera thanked JT and hung up, placing her phone back on the table. The conversation with Eunice and the hard evidence from JT had crystallized her mission. "You have to pivot now," Eunice urged, leaning forward. "Stop talking about the hotel and start talking about the city's leadership. You're not just a hotel owner. You're a whistleblower. Use the assault, use the brick, use the inspectors, not as damages for a lawsuit, but as evidence of a criminal conspiracy at the highest level of Charleston's government." Sera looked at the older woman, recognizing the path forward. "We hit Hollis directly. We expose the whole scheme before he can pressure a single judge or jury." "That's right," Eunice said, her smile returning, sharp and proud. "You turn their weapon, the public humiliation, back onto them. You don't just win the case, child. You clean house." Sera rose from the table, no longer feeling the exhaustion or the pain of the bruise, only the clear, cold focus of a general about to launch a decisive attack. She gave Aunt Eunice a hug that was both grateful and resolute. The time for defense was over. It was time for the unmasking. The command center in the Harbor Light was now a crucible of final preparations. Eli Vance and Addie Ava Sharma were hunched over a massive digital display where every piece of evidence was meticulously organized. The crisp lobby surveillance footage of Sera's brutal arrest. The scanned high-resolution image of the threatening brick and its typed note. And the crowning piece, the intricate financial flowchart detailing the monthly payments from Harborfront Development LLC, Hollis, principal into the personal bank accounts of Marcus Thorne. The case is ironclad. "Dr. Jones," Ava confirmed, her voice ringing with satisfaction. "We have the motive, Hollis's financial interest. The method, Thorne's internal sabotage and the manufactured police report. And the escalation, the physical threat with the brick. It paints a portrait of organized criminal coercion, not just a simple employment dispute." Eli nodded, his gaze lingering on the image of the police report. "We've also flagged the police radio traffic logs. Thorne's 911 call was routed with immediate priority, and Sergeant Klein's unit was diverted from a low-priority traffic stop. It was a planned response, not a random patrol." "Good," Sera said, her voice low and steady. She wore the same crisp white blazer, the bruise on her cheek a visible emblem of her fight. "Ava, file the federal lawsuit now." I want the papers stamped and delivered to City Hall before the press conference begins. We hit them with the legal hammer and the media blast simultaneously. The lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court named the City of Charleston, the Police Department, Councilman Hollis, and Marcus Thorne. It demanded not only compensatory and punitive damages, but also sweeping institutional reforms and an injunction against any further property, inspections, or harassment related to Hollis's committee. At 1 p.m., the press conference commenced on the steps of the Harbor Light. Dozens of local and national news cameras were present. Positioned directly in front of the window covered with the temporary plywood, a silent, powerful backdrop to the story, Sera stood between Eli and a resolute Mama G. Sera did not begin by talking about her pain or her assault. Instead, she pivoted, placing the focus squarely on the systemic corruption. 2 weeks ago, I was assaulted and arrested in the lobby of the hotel my father founded. The world saw the video and the world saw the injustice, but that was not the end of the story. It was merely the opening scene of a much larger conspiracy. She paused, allowing the weight of the statement to settle. This fight is not about a bad manager or a few bad officers. It is about the powerful people in this city who believe they have the right to steal property and erase Black history for their personal profit. Sera then directed Eli to project a simple slide onto a screen beside her. The financial flowchart. We have discovered, Sera announced, her voice rising with clarity and righteous indignation, that the former manager who called the police, Marcus Thorne, was on a substantial monthly payroll, not from the Harbor Light, but from a shell company. That shell company is called Harborfront Development LLC. She let the name hang in the air, electric with implication. The principal and primary beneficiary of that company is Councilman Reginald Hollis, chairman of the Urban Redevelopment Committee. The gathered reporters erupted, their shouts mixing with the furious clicking of cameras. Sera raised a hand for silence, her composure unwavering. Mr. Hollis used his political power, his committee, and his developer friends to hire an inside operative to sabotage my business, manufacture violations, and pressure me to sell. When that failed, he used the Charleston Police Department to attempt to forcefully remove the legal owner from her own property under false pretenses. And when that failed, she pointed directly at the scar of the plywood behind her. They resorted to domestic terrorism. This is not just an abuse of office, Sera concluded, her voice ringing with finality. This is property theft, this is corruption, and this is criminal use of state power for personal gain. Councilman Hollis used city resources to commit a felony, and he must be held accountable. She finished her statement, her posture iron straight. Her gaze swept over the cameras, encompassing the city beyond. They mistook the Harbor Light for a target, Sera declared, her final words delivered with absolute resolve. They will learn it is a beacon. As the press conference dissolved into pandemonium, the political fallout for Hollis was immediate and catastrophic. His office went dark. The mayor's office, already under pressure from the federal lawsuit, issued an immediate statement distancing itself from Hollis and demanding his resignation. The local district attorney's office announced an immediate criminal investigation into the LLC and the abuse of the 911 system. Sera walked back into her lobby, the roar of the media fading behind her. The battle had been won not with a fist, but with the ruthless precision of truth. The Harbor Light stood defiant, no longer just a hotel, but a symbol, a beacon against the dark tide of gentrification and corruption.